I already know that this is going to ruffle some feathers, but that's kind of the point. I'm going to argue today that Paul McCartney is better than Jaco Pastorius. But it's also important to note that this actually has nothing to do with these guys, and it's all about you. Paul McCartney and Jaco Pastorius, they're both phenomenal. They don't play anything alike. So why is Paul McCartney better than Jaco Pastorius? Well, this is really a conversation about musical values, development, and where your attention should go, in my opinion, especially if you're a younger musician or trying to grow as a musician and you play the bass. So let's be real, first of all, if you're a bass player and you're not a fan of Jaco Pastorius, you probably just aren't there yet. Maybe you haven't even heard of the guy. He is one of the GOATs. The phrasing, the harmonics, the tone, he's iconic for a reason. He really is a game changer in the history of the electric bass playing in general. He was extremely dynamic as a musician and is, in my opinion, inimitable. You cannot imitate this guy. He is really special. He's really unique. He is the GOAT. The problem is, though, that a lot of underexperienced players or younger musicians really fixate on the flash of Jaco. I'm talking about the crazy chops and the amazing intonation and the clean precision and the amazing tone. And I'm really just projecting here because I used to be that way as well. I first heard of Jaco Pastorius when I was, I believe, 14 years old, and I couldn't get enough of it. I really desperately wanted to play like him. And well, if it's not obvious, I didn't get there because, well, I don't think you can get there, first of all. Don't get me wrong, it's a great person to look up to, but I think the things that make Jaco really appealing are the things that you cannot imitate accurately. It's kind of like trying to be somebody who you are not. The things that make him really special are the things that are uniquely his own. A lot of people want to solo like him, but don't spend the time learning how to be a bass player like he did. I'm talking about locking in with a drummer, playing as part of an ensemble, knowing your role on the instrument, choosing good notes, playing with good time, playing with taste. All of these things are easy to neglect when you see someone who is so exceptional at what they do. Jaco's list of influences is really a who's who of recording artists. I'm talking about great bass players who shaped a lot of the popular music of the 1960s and 70s. Guys like James Jamerson and Donald Dunn, and funny enough, actually Paul Chambers.
Paul Chambers.
Funny enough, actually Paul McCartney himself.
Paul McCartney. I love his bass.
Yep.
People try to imitate all of Jaco's flash, all the things on the surface that you really can't imitate, while neglecting to deal with the things that really made him great. It's not his soloing, it's not his amazing chops, but rather his feel and his musicianship. But this doesn't only happen to Jaco, it really happens to all of these great and widely appreciated musicians. I'm talking about people like Victor Wooten. I'm talking about Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. A lot of guys like this really get celebrated, and as a result, many people try to imitate them without dealing with the musical elements that all of these guys had to deal with themselves. How many Timu versions of Victor Wooten or Flea have you heard in your life? But this is the part of the video where we have to mention Paul McCartney, because Paul McCartney isn't flashy. He's not celebrated for his chops. In fact, he is the example of how to be a complete bass player. His tone and his feel and his note choices, these are all in service of the music, always. He's not trying to impress the listener. He's trying to carry the music. And that is something that, in my opinion, most young musicians or inexperienced musicians need to deal with early on. It's something that can be easily overlooked. There's this fantasy of being, a so-called lead bassist a lot of the time. I'm talking about having these godlike chops, the ability to slap really quickly and tap really quickly, and soloing. And I'm right there with you on the soloing. I love that.
Symmetrical diminished.
That's in fact what I talk about most of the time. I love soloing, but that's not the point of being a bass player. You get hired to make a band feel good. Paul McCartney is just one example of many bass players who did that. And in fact, Jaco is another great example of a bass player who did that. Paul McCartney can make a really simple bass line sing and bounce. That is mastery, and that is the stuff that ought to be studied. So if you're trying to develop as a bassist, here is the simple truth. You'll get a lot further studying Paul McCartney and his restraint and his note choice and his time feel than by trying to shred like Jaco Pastorius. You can't be Jaco Pastorius without his discipline. And on top of that, Paul McCartney is just very accessible. It's a great example of how you should be as a bass player if you want to serve the role of the bass and to serve the music first and foremost. And that skill, of course, is incredibly important, whether you're on stage or rehearsing or even just practicing at home. You should always try to deal with the music. So if you haven't figured it out yet, this video isn't really about Paul McCartney or Jaco Pastorius, but it's about being honest about what you need to actually grow as a musician. Jaco was a one of one, and Paul McCartney, Paul is what happens when you master the fundamentals and you serve the music. And stay humble enough not to overplay. So I'll say it again. Paul McCartney is greater than Jaco Pastorius, but I'm speaking not as a musician, but as an influence for how you should model your bass playing if you want to be a functional musician and serve the music properly. He is a great role model for all of us. And that's not to say that Jaco Pastorius is a chump. He's obviously one of the all-time greats. There's no denying that. But it's not about these guys. It's about you. So if this video made you think at all, whether you agree or disagree, let me know your thoughts. In fact, if you disagree, I really want to know. Who shaped your playing? What do you think is important in a bass player? Shameless Patreon plug. If you like this kind of thing, that is hot takes and opinions, but if you're also passionate about improving on the bass and dealing with these concepts that I just spent some time disrespecting, ideas like soloing advice, different etudes for playing the bass in a soloistic way, dealing with music theory, checking out other players, studying the history, come join me on Patreon. That's where the party is. YouTube is really a place where I like to share some thoughts and share more broad information. But if you're serious about becoming a better musician, I have my Patreon page where I share all sorts of exclusive lessons, exclusive PDFs. I have workbooks, I have transcriptions, etc. It's a place where you can join me and work on your musicianship. I would be thrilled if you joined me there. By the way, memberships are pretty cheap. They're about $5 a month US. Or if you'd like a premium option, you can actually study with me one-on-one. That's a little bit more expensive, but in my opinion, that's the best way to learn. And I would be more than happy to meet you there. So anyways, till next time, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that YouTube that people always talk about. All right, ciao.